Hello, everybody, and welcome back to session 2 of our DBX EU MODEX conference on marine pollution. Hope everybody's managed to have a cup of coffee, get fired up with some caffeine for the next session of this morning. And to our virtual audience out there, but also to our participants here in the room, I've been asked to give you a reminder once again of the question protocol. We are using Mentimeter, and you've got a code that you can scan on the seats in front of you. And for anyone tuning in for the first time in our virtual audience, please just look into the chat for the link to go to Mentimeter, and that is where you can please, during the proceedings, start entering your questions. Feel free during the presentations to start putting questions in there. And if you have questions for our panelists afterwards, please do use the Mentimeter function. Also, you here in the room, simply because we haven't got flying mics in this situation. So that was the first reminder. I also would just like to do a shout out to our virtual audience at COCATRAM, because COCATRAM is the emergency response network for the Central American and Caribbean region. They're joining remotely, but also apparently going to take our entire recorded version of the proceedings here today and share them. So very much along the lines of what Rodolfo was just saying in our panel, with actually sharing the information and sharing the expertise and amplifying a lot of the findings that will be amplified with the entire Central American and Caribbean region. So a shout out to them, and we're very, very pleased that that the hard work that's been done here in Porvoo is actually going to travel transatlantic over to them. So we'll proceed now with a presentation of the results of our DB EU MODEX in phases 3 and 4. So that was environmental response and, of course, long-term impact when major contamination in the scenarios that we're dealing with here with E-land, F-land, and S-land. I think I made a mistake there earlier today. Major contamination has definitely occurred, and long-term impacts of the aftermath on health, environment, and cleanup are clear, and are obviously the dimensions are starting to be clear. So I'd like to ask our two participants up to present those two phases, and please give a warm welcome to Eric Donnay, who's here from Belgium, and he's going to give the environmental response. And Ruth Ciarlo is also here from Malta. She's going to be doing long-term impact. If you also want to come up on stage and sit and take a chair here, Ruth, and Eric can start with his first phase. Warm welcome to Ruth. And the floor is yours to present your findings.
Thank you very much. Let's see if I can get the first slide. So, referring to the film with the scenario, you see that things are now getting worse and more complex, and so that was a little bit challenging for this phase to capture everything in a short presentation. So we hope we managed to find a way to pass the message to you. And for the organization of the discussion, it's important to note that we had to start with a baseline, a background, and the reference is the contingency planning. So we all have contingency plan, and it's important that we know about them. And historically speaking, at the beginning, they were quite generic contingency plan, but gaining experience, facing different type of issues during response, then we have complemented our national contingency plan with more specific chapters. Historically, we started with oil spill response, but later on we tried to also add part about hazardous and noxious substances, which are transported in large amount nowadays, and also other aspects like wildlife and nature protection response. And in the future, we can also imagine that we will have specific part for the issues related to offshore wind farms that are developing almost everywhere around Europe. The plan is one thing, but you need equipment. Equipment at national level, national stockpiles, but everybody agree that no country has enough resources to face major incident on its own. So cooperation, assistance is required, and it was the occasion to review all the type of assistance that are available for member states at European level. So the role of the emergency response center, ERCC of the Commission, the support that can be obtained from EMSA, different services, expertise. So it was all in our background of the discussion. Having equipment is not yet sufficient. You need people to deploy the equipment, and those people need to be trained. So there was also an important focus about the need to practice, to organize exercise, but also exercise at a sufficient scale to be prepared for handling complex situations like we did this week. And also the need, we can do that in room, but to a certain point there is also a need to practice in the field. Having said that, we can move to more specific issues. It's a selection. It's not comprehensive, but one of the important elements was information and communication, which is paramount if you have to put people together with different functions. It's very important that they can share information and they can communicate in a seamless way with them. And one of the aspects we have identified based on the scenario, we have at a certain moment toxic smoke reaching a populated area. Then the point was, how could we alert the population and pass instruction to the population? So we had some exchange over the money, the way it was done in different countries. Another point, they are not necessarily related with each other, is the sampling and the collection of evidence for different purposes. One of them being to assess the behavior of the pollutant, because it's important for the response. You have to adjust the response to the problem posed by the pollutant. Another very important aspect is it is more at the level of measurements of air quality or water quality. That's to serve the safety of responders and the public, of course. And then the last aspect is the fact that a pollution situation implies that the polluter pays principle applies. So in order to submit a claim, you need to collect evidence on the reasonable character of your actions, but also an important aspect is to be able to link the pollution with the polluter. And so that's why a sampling campaign by a dedicated team and with forensic experience is needed. I mentioned the importance of information and communication. And to achieve that, we have reviewed the different way of communicating we have at hand. And nowadays, with the computer systems, we have different platforms such as SASIS, Safety Net, that allow us to share information, to alert on incident, share information, pass request for assistance, and so they play a very important role to support the cooperation between the different parties involved, and especially when several countries are involved, like in the scenario for this DBX. Then another aspect, you see that it's very diverse. That was the media management. Media nowadays, and especially with the social networks, managing information to the public is quite challenging and requests attention. But if you look what the role of the media could be, I would say the first thing is to disseminate fact-checked information. And that's the problem, that you have all kinds of information, but fact-checking is a big issue. The second of another role is to inform the population, give them instruction. We had the reference to the warning system, alert system. So the media are also one way to inform the population. And also, media can be used to give instruction to the population. And one example, for instance, is if they suffer damage, what should they do? So it has nothing more to do with instruction on how to protect them, or of information about the incident itself, but it's to advise them or to provide them information on practical issues. Then another keyword for this exercise was cooperation, collaboration. And it has already been addressed in the presentation with the Concordia, is to recognize the roles and the responsibility of the different players. Very often, I would say, there is the idea, you have the polluter, it's the bad guy, and the authorities, they have the good role. In practice, it is incorrect. We are all facing a problem. Of course, the responsibilities are different, but we are facing the same problem and sharing the same goal, is to solve it as quickly and as cost-effective possible. So that's the reason why there was agreement that all the parties have to be involved from the beginning in the process and the decision making. And I mean not only the authorities, but also the ship owner, the insurers, the expert of the insurers, the cargo owner. So there are many people that can deliver useful input and help developing a good plan to respond to the situation. At the level of the authorities, in terms of cooperation, that was one point also for the DBX, is to foster the communication between land and maritime authorities. And I think it became quite obvious for all of us, and maybe the best reference of the best example is the mass rescue operation. It started at sea. The maritime authorities have information about the number of casualties, and the land authorities, they need to know how many people will be brought ashore in order to set up the logistics needed to take them, type of injuries, to know what kind of medical assistance will be required, how many people have to be brought to a hospital. So there is not two compartments. There is one chain of response, and all elements of the chain have to communicate with each other. So that was a strong message that was taken by the participants. The next point is about international assistance and cooperation. As I mentioned, we are all aware that with our national capacities, we will not be able, in all circumstances, to handle a major incident, and that we will have to request assistance of other countries, but also see what we can get as support at a European level. And as I mentioned, there are different possibilities. So this cooperation can be organized, and we had already mentioned of it, at bilateral level between two countries, but also at regional level. And in Europe, we are quite lucky because all the sea basin around Europe are covered by regional agreements that are achieving more or less the same goals, and they are very important instruments for cooperation between the member countries. At European level, I said we should not focus only on regional agreement, because we have also a lot of support available at European level. I mentioned CESIS, ERCC, Safety Net, and also the European Maritime Safety Agency, EMSA, who most of us, we know that they deliver a lot of support with oil spill, pre-contracted oil spill response vessel, satellite monitoring program, Clean Sea Net, and also expertise like information on hazardous and noxious substance through the MAHI services, and so on. Then we had a kind of point of attention is that, and that's what we have spoken about, networking and the importance of networking and learning from other experts. But it's very important to know people in advance when we respond together, but it should not bypass the institutional agreement of framework. So we need to remain within the limit of the agreements and the organizations that have been set up. Then in terms of collaboration and response, we go further. We have the support through existing model that can help us to predict things like the drift or the behavior of the pollutant, and network of experts that can help us to use them correctly, because a model is simulating a situation, but the limitation of the model, they are not perfect. So the quality of the data is paramount, because if you inject poor quality data in a model, the output will be also of poor quality and could be misleading. And but there are different examples, I would say maybe good practices. For the Baltic area, for instance, they have TrackWeb, so they share one common one common tool, and it is very useful because then it is understood by everybody. That was for the modeling. As such, is a subject that can be developed more or less endlessly, so I will not do it now. And then another issue is, and I'm reaching the end, the integration of self-mobilizing citizens or spontaneous volunteer, because we have all faced this situation, and it can be a problem for the response. How can we integrate them in a safe and well-organized manner in our response organization? So we had discussion about different approaches, and so that's kind of takeaway. We can go back home and think about it for ourselves at national level. And last point is tapping into resource of expertise. So it is also very clear through the discussion that there is a lot of expertise available, and there is a need to identify those sources of expertise to be able to use them when needed. An aspect that can be, and that will be my conclusion, the challenge for the response are not static. They are still changing over the time because the maritime transport is changing over the time. So I mentioned the hazardous and noxious substances to get new information to improve our expertise. DG ECO is funding a lot of projects, and it is very important that the outcome of those projects are injected in our response plan. I mentioned hazardous noxious substances. The new fuels are a big challenge because we were used to fuels that are derived from crude oil, but now we have all kinds of substances that are used for fuel, and in the near future it will change again. And they are no longer the same. They have other physical and chemical characteristics, and they behave differently. So how fit is our response capacity in terms of equipment, recovery equipment, to deal with this kind of new substances? And then an emerging, or no longer emerging, but something which is more and more present in response is a wildlife response. And now there are more and more plans. Not every country has a plan for wildlife, but that's also something. And there is at European level the EUROA service. So, voilà, I will stop here because I've used more than my time. And hand over to the next speaker. I warned that there was many things to it.
Okay, so once the alert, rescue, and environmental response phase were discussed, it's now the time for the long-term impacts. Okay, starting from the first result or first outcome that was discussed, this being the holistic and integrated impact assessment. What are we talking about here? So we are looking into long-term studies, looking into ecological monitoring, asking ourselves, do we have the right baselines? The standards that we have used or we are still using, carrying out the necessary monitoring according to agreed terms of reference and guidances, evaluating the before and after of our monitoring to determine the extent of damage, proceed with further periodic monitoring to assess the extent of the damage and contamination, as well as identify any hopes for regeneration and intervention. The impact assessment is also affected by economical losses. So this needs to be reviewed and studied. We are talking about polluted waters, contaminated shores. So we have a number of serious losses, aquaculture impacts, aquaculture losses, critical infrastructure that has stopped, industries that are being affected, harbors that might have been closed, tourism. The impact on tourism is huge. So we need to study, evaluate, and determine what were our losses. We are also talking about impact assessment in terms of the health and safety considerations. So the medical assistance that has been given or is still being given, the long-term psychological assistance, setting up helplines for those who require help and information, perhaps the requirement for any shelters. The second outcome that was discussed is that this is a time of political awareness. It's a window of opportunity. And why is this? Because we can use this time, we can use this situation to our advantage in order to implement further change. So we are talking about putting pressures into updating our legislations, introduce new institutions, provide or implement new duties for our ministries at any level and on any topic that we have been discussing today. Allocate more funds, so more targeted budgeting. Remember that at this stage, there's a lot of lobbying that is going on. Another point that was discussed is the claims management and the importance of informing affected, interested parties, stakeholders of the claims process. So the importance of keeping the relevant documentation in order, adequate record keeping, as well as proper archiving. Do we have the necessary information? Do we have all the data that is required to exhibit when it's time to prepare our claims? Do we have the necessary environmental data, analysis, statistics, waste records, and are they well kept enough and in good order to present? We also keep in mind that all this information, all this documentation might be required in case we need to present all this information in front of a court of law and not just presenting our claims. It is also to note that when it comes to claims, there is a 3-year time window, so that needs also to be considered and made sure that everyone is informed. Okay, moving on to lessons learned. Here we are talking about going through and examining our reports, analysis, the briefings made, waste management outcomes, in order to help us review and improve on our preparedness. This will allow us to be better prepared in the case of another emergency and try to limit the long-term impacts. Another point that was raised is raising awareness on the socio-economic impacts. What do we mean by this? So we are aware that the incident left big loss of income, impacts on our industries, critical infrastructure, aquaculture, fisheries, tourism, everything has been impacted. So one could make good use of the media to raise awareness on the consequences of this incident and on informing on the impacts. So demonstrating, showing, keeping abreast of the actions being taken, showing accountability. Also informing on any plans for restoration, regeneration, improvements. Another point that was discussed is the awareness about, raising awareness about existing support within the EU. And one of the points mentioned was the EU Solidarity Fund, but this is not just the only one. So we want to be more conscious on how the European Union can assist and provide support in situations such as this on all fronts, not just on a financial level. So equipment, human resources, IT, tools, expertise, population and volunteer management, training, how different departments can interact with each other to provide the best outcome in a situation such as this. Okay, so, right. Moving on to national, or regional, national, European, and perhaps international cooperation. The setting up of agreements, memorandums of understanding was discussed at this point in order to be prepared so that all countries, you know, that you would sort of know that you have the support of other countries when the time comes and we need other countries' support. So this would ascertain that help will certainly be coming our way. And obviously, making sure that the help coming our way is professional and sort of in the numbers that we require. Another good point that was raised is the harmonization of procedures, protocols, standards, and guidelines. What are we discussing here? So the point that was made here is this. It would be great for all countries to have a similar setup, okay? So that when we are on site in a situation such as this, all countries are talking at the same level. So we are speaking the same language. Like a small example, that we operate in the same way, that we coordinate in a similar way. It need not be exactly the same, but the gist is this, that we all speak the same language when we are on site and in a state of panic. Finally, and very importantly, we discussed the necessities for the review of contingency plans. So we don't shelf our contingency plans, but taking the lessons learned and the experience from an incident such as this, from a situation such as this, to update and adjust according to the circumstances, time, and developments. So using updated risk assessments to set a basis for changes that need to be made to our contingency plan, fill in the gaps, improve on strategies, update our protocols, and even introduce new ones if need be. Times are changing and we need to be more prepared. Fuels are evolving, the climate is changing, equipment are developing. So we really need to be up to date with changing times. And obviously, remember to restock and restore equipment. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Ruth Ciarlo and to Eric Donnay for those presentations of the findings of their two phases. As Eric said, obviously very, very complex for the environmental response, and I think with long-term impacts, then we're getting into the phase that includes the forgotten emergency, which was spoken about yesterday. So where the dimensions of some of these incidents begin to appear, and it's clear that they go on for years and years and years. Well, we're going to follow these two presentations, once again with a comparison of results of a real-life case study. In fact, two, because we were going to be talking about the Agia Zoni II, which is an oil tanker that sank off of Greece back in 2017. It was a vessel that was loaded with heavy fuel and fuel oil and marine oil gas, so created quite a pollution situation, but also because it is Rodolfo Giovannini who's coming back to talk to us about this, he'll talk a bit more about the environmental impact of the Costa Concordia from that environmental perspective. So once again, Rodolfo Giovannini is here to present, and just for anyone who is tuning in newly online, he participated in the Agia Zoni II oil pollution recovery operation in Greece, but he's also been involved directly with the Costa Concordia emergency, as we heard in our first morning session. He's a captain in the Italian Navy and currently employed at the Ministry of Environment and Energy Security. So we'll give him the floor, and happy to hear his insights into those two catastrophes.
Well, I'm going to present those two cases in the same presentation, because one, the Costa Concordia one, is more focused, but both are focused on the phase 3 and phase 4 of our exercises. But the Costa Concordia is more focused on the waste management and long-term effect on the environment from such emergencies, and Agia Zoni is more focused on the oil spill response at sea and on the shoreline cleanup. So I hope I will capture your attention on this, but if not, please at least do not snore, okay? The focus will be the anti-pollution oil recovery plan, the waste recovery plan, and the sewage recovery plan, and at the end, the environmental and monitoring plan. This is an overview of the pollutants that we had on board, we found on board of the Concordia. Bunker oil, 2,243 cubic meters, IFO 380, 200 marine diesel oil, and uncertain quantity of lubricant oil. Sewage treatment products, 642 cubic meters. Chemical products and other pollutant for hotel, deck, engine purposes, completely identified in quantity and location on board, floating waste, waste on the seabed, greenhouse gases inside the pipeline of the vessel, and on the basis of specific assessment, different contingency plans have been developed and adopted to manage the oil recovery, the waste management, and the marine environment monitoring. On January 14th, practically the same day in which the vessel sank, Coast Guard served a letter of formal notice to Costa Crociere Company to act in order to remove the danger of oil pollution, the waste, the wreck, and provision for environmental protection. Therefore, Costa Crociere had to prepare their respective plans for their approval by the competent authorities. The Technical Scientific Committee, that, as David explained, was in charge to approve all those plans. I was appointed as the representative of the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure, and they submitted a few days later the contingency plan for the oil spill recovery, and we approved the plans on the 14th of February. These plans contained the response vessel fleet, the composition of the response vessel fleet. It was designed on the worst case scenario. As also David already explained, one of the worst concern that we had was regarding the risk of the slipping of the vessel, because it was laid not on a flat, sandy seabed, but on the rocky seabed, inclined around 20, 30 degrees, and the vessel was also listed of 80 degrees. And all the simulation made by the experts said that there were the danger of slipping of the vessel up to the depth of 60 meters. That was a very impressive danger. And they calculated, the experts, that it could happen with force 7/8 waves. And in the historical data, we found that every 2-3 years we have such a storm in the area. So it was really urgent, and we made this worst-case scenario on the basis of this data, scientific basis, of course. Oil removal operation on the hot tapping techniques, boom deployment, this is the number of the booms that he read, and the oil and wildlife care, a permanent post there on the island for all the operation. A shoreline cleanup equipment, of course, ready there to be deployed. And this is more or less the figure of the composition of the fleet at sea, with the booms deployed to protect the vessel and the coast. And an important point that I want to highlight is the fact that in the area was also an EMSA contracted vessel, the Salina Bay, that was based in La Spezia, in the north of Italy. And for the first time ever, it was requested by the Costa Concordia, the Costa Company. Not was requested by the member states, even though at the time the formal papers of EMSA said the member state can request the vessel, not the responsible party. But the Italian Minister of Environment said to the Commission, look, we think that we might apply the principle who polluter pay. And the Commission agreed on this, and for the first time ever, they will agreed with us, and the polluters, in this, we can say the responsible party, requested the vessel, and it was so on the scene upon the request of the Costa Company. The anti-pollution oil recovery plan, amongst the various annexes, you have to imagine that it's not just a plan that we should do this and that. It's full of annexes and documentation, and as ITOP suggests us, and when they brief us at the beginning of our job, put every single studies and justify on the technical and scientific basis every choice you do. So amongst the various annexes, we have also differentiated boom deployment design on the basis of the weather, of course, and all safety certification for each operations. Tanker and barge mooring design, it was studied deeply because for the danger of the slip, to not stress the vessel, and at the same time to secure the barge and the tanker during the oil removal operations. So we involved also shipyards, the Italian naval registries, experts in studying every single moment, every single operation, every single activities, and of course a daily reporting system in order to be updated and to document every single activity daily. This is how the hot tapping works. A diver had to make a hole in the upper part of the tank in order to fix this flange particular valve, and another hole in the lower part of the tank. So in this way, when we pump the oil out, in the same time we insert the water. So there is an equilibrium. It's not stressed, nor the the weight of the vessel and the equilibrium in the for the list also. At the end, all the oil that is possible to pump comes into the barge and from the barge to the tanker. And of course, there is a small amount, it was calculated around 10–15% of unpumpable oil will remain on board. So saving also, in this case, the stability of the vessel. This was the scheduled steps. We started in 19th of February, and we ended on the 2nd of March with the last part, the stern. The full operation finished on the 24th of March with the removal of 2,042 cubic meters, and in the 4 tanks, we leave 243 cubic meters. It was around 12% of the oil on board. In the meantime, during all that period, the Italian Coast Guard Operational Center has provided daily forecasts about a possible fuel oil drifting, not only in the worst case scenario, but during the operation, something could happen anyway. So if a noise leak will escape from the boom, we were any day ready in advance where to deploy the vessels, where to deploy the booms, so to gain time that is very important in such cases. The waste recovery plan. They submitted the plan to our committee, and it was approved on the 21st of February. It was a very long activity. I remember we requested to Costa to amend it 6 times, the plan, including every time news. It was regarding the sewage, the floating object and debris coming out from the ship, the sunken object and debris, activity that continue, of course, in a massive way after the wreck removal, and the other potential pollutants. At the end, also, we said that the president of province was appointed as project supervisor because it was a very long activities that it continued for years and years also after the wreck removal. This was the plan in brief for the sewage removal. We selected to remove with the same techniques, with the hot tapping techniques, all the black waters that were stored in those tanks that are indicated with the green line, and the 4 indicated with the red line were considered inaccessible, so we did not empty them. The waste recovery plan, during the sink, of course, many objects fall at sea, and we started at the 1st of April, and we completed on the 5th of May the cleaning of the seabed, selecting the area on the basis, also in this case, of the risk assessment. And, okay, of course, we planned to start from the stern after the completion of the oil removal and the sewage removal activities in order to not have conflict of the various operations. Safety first, of course, every time. Green area were indicated as safety areas, the yellow, the next areas to be cleaned, and the red one where there also still the risk of falling of other objects from the vessel. This was the workflow for the debris removal. The motorboat that was helping the divers for the recovery of the debris, and the Marzocco is a barge where we did the storage initially. On the Giglio Island, we decided to do the first waste collection and classification. We start to divide the very different type of waste collected, and important, first police check on board immediately in order to find something interesting for the investigation and subject to sequestration immediately after they recover. Then the transportation on land in an harbor in Tuscany, where we transfer from the barge to a selected storage, and there the final waste selection, the object that should be recovered or recycled or disposed. And the second police check, because at this time we could able to return to passenger or their relatives their own object. Other pollutants, this was the very long story, because as I said before, everything was on board. Many different types of potential polluting substances were present on board, and there were in every bridge and on every bridge in many different locations. We estimated the integrity times of the packaging of all those products, other than those contained in the tanks that we already formulated previously. Cleaning materials, solvents, paints, greases, disinfectant, sterilizer, gases, hydraulic oil, etc., etc. It was a very long, long list. We did the assessment in two steps. The first step, we used this formula to assess the risk, the environmental risk. The second part of the assessment was using the previous formula, the result of the previous formula. This was related to the risk factor on the health of the diving operations. You can see the red line for any single locker. We asked to Concordia to indicate the passage for the divers. This is just an example, but you can imagine how many of these passages were studied to reach the paint locker. They had to passage in a listed 80 degrees vessel where the floor became the ceiling. Once reached, they have to come back with the paint in their hand, and if something happens, it's a mess. In a water that is not clear, that maybe is also contaminated, so also the equipment of the diver were different from the normal one. So at the end, the conclusion, on the basis of the risk-benefit assessment, the risk of exposure of the operator was estimated as unacceptable, and we decide for the strict environmental monitoring pending the removal of the wreck that was already going ahead, and they told us that in almost 2 years they will remove the wreck. So we decided that it was the better choice to don't touch anything on board, because it was more high the risk for the divers, for the human life, than the risk for the environment. The environmental monitoring plan. The main objective was to collect information about the health status at the moment of immediately after the sink, around the wreck, evaluating eventual effect of this potential polluter source. The vessel itself is a pollution source. To enhance the acknowledgement of a specific marine ecosystem, particularly sensitive to the pollution, So a complete mapping of what was there at the moment was done. The environmental monitoring forests the following analysis of the water column, the sediments, the biota, and the survey of the seafloor with two systems, optical one, the remotely operated vehicles, and a multi-beam to select the main benthic population and assemblages. This is the form that was done accordingly with the scientific exams of all the substances that were potentially pollute the water around the vessel. With the parameters, chemical, physical parameters, organic substance, solvents, detergents, microbiological parameters, and toxicity tests. If I remember well, we decided to do this kind of samples and analysis weekly, and to put every results in a website in order to be transparent and to inform the population. In addition, we tested this type of analysis. We put 3 monitoring stations with mussels placed nearby the vessel. The mussels are like a sponge, so they accumulate any kind of substance that is in the water column. So in between the two samples, we could know, analyzing the mussel, if in between we have had a toxic substance in the water column. Even though, because when you sample, you have just a picture of that in that moment. You don't know if in between you have had some pollution. In this case, it's possible. So this is the picture where the mussel station were fixed near the vessel and around the vessel. And in final, removal of debris in the same plane, the removal of the debris of the wreck on the seabed and the resulting materials after the wreck removal. Once the vessel was at sea, refloated and transferred to Genoa, they had to start with the removal of the debris on the seabed, the removal of the subsea platform, the cutting of the piles on the seabed that was used to upright the vessel, the removal and dismantling of the fixed and mobile equipment, all vehicles used during the recovery of the wreck, and the last phase, more important, the seabed restoration and 5-year monitoring of its effect. I put here some pictures of the situation immediately after the sunk of the vessel, the coral reef that is on the left, and after the removal of the vessel, totally destroyed. 2.5 years without the light, and submerged from the sand and all the debris that were fallen from the vessel. The area around the vessel was more or less in the same situation. The picture of the bentonic situation at the beginning and at the end of the operations, and the picture of the transplanting of the Posidonia middle. Okay, thanks for the attention for this part of the presentation. This is the Giglio Island nowadays. This picture of this summer after the removal. Now the Agia Zoni II. The accident that happened on Piraeus on 7th of September 2017. The top is incident and rescue operation, just one slide. And then oil spill, the response at sea, the shoreline cleanup, and the environmental impact and considerations from ITOPS and other organizations. Well, it happens in 2 hours, everything. The vessel was anchored just in front of Piraeus Harbor. The Piraeus Harbor is the harbor of Athens in the anchorage area. The 2 crew members on board said, oh, we are sinking. And 2 couples of hours later, of course, they were immediately rescued. The vessel sank totally. The Agia Zoni had on board 2,200 cubic meters of fuel oil, 355 cubic meters of gas oil, and 300 liters of lubricants. As you can see in the picture, fuel oil and marine gas oil were spread in the wider area of Piraeus anchorage around the wreck. We have, you can see that the small island on top of left of the picture, that is Salamis Island. And the oil initially, for the first and the second day, was just around the sunken point because the weather was calm weather. No wind, no waves, perfect conditions. The oil was leaking from pipes, vents, and manholes for an estimated amount of 500 cubic meters. The sealing operation started in the morning of the same day, and were fully completed 2 days later. Oops. After the hatches and vents were sealed, the sailor commenced the hot tapping operation. By 19th of September, 1,533 cubic meters have been removed and pumped into the tanker Agia that you see in the picture. And the master and the chief engineer of the Agia were arrested on suspicion of smuggling, and further delays in the operation followed 3 days of delay. They found the oil and the ballast water instead of the water. On 12th September, at 22:15 UTC, Greece requested through CESIS EMSA oil pollution response vessel Actia. So we are talking about 3 days later. At the time I was at EMSA working with Victor, and we spent, I remember, the night in the office dealing with the signature of the incident response contract that was signed at 8 o'clock in the morning. And the vessel was on site since the same morning at 6, ready. And once the contract was signed, it started to recovery, because it was just in the Piraeus port in front, half nautical mile from the anchorage. Also, EMSA provides extra satellite images. I departed immediately, and I reached the EMSA vessel the late evening. Oops. It's important also to see the picture, because on the 3rd day the weather change, comes a bit of wind from the northwest, and oil move and polluted all the area on the southeast of Athens. We are talking about Salamina, that is a beautiful beach. REMPEC, on this period, the regional agreement in the Mediterranean Sea, provided 2 oil drift forecasting systems, and you can compare, more or less, are very similar. And the day 10, the day 11, so the first and the second day, the oil slick was in the same area, very thick, so perfect condition for the recovery. And on the 13 and 15, it start to be dispatched, and the thickness was always less and less and less. During the oil recovery activity of the EMSA vessel, Actia, only sweeping cameras were used. The recovery was very efficient only on the 13th of September, the day in which they signed the contract, because the waitering comes doing his job, and the slick was not more in one position, was scattered, and the weathering was proceeding speedily because it was September, good weather, sunny days, a few winds, so most of the oil reached the coast, and at sea we have only those kind of substance. I took this picture. You see tar balls and chocolate mousse. This was taken 4 days after. Six anti-pollution craft, 2 Coast Guard patrol boats, 6 private cleanup ships, vessel opportunity, boats of the Agia Zoni II non-wing company, and several volunteers boats were involved in the cleaning up of the waters in the surrounding Gulf. I took this picture, and you see are more or less small vessels with not such big capacity. And on September 27, the Greek authorities sent a notice of ending the operation activities for the Actia. The Salvor removed 2,077 cubic meters of oil from the wreck using the tapping techniques. The wreck was lifted by 30 November and towed shortly thereafter to the Salvor shipyard on Salamina Island. At the time of lifting the wreck, some oil escaped again and recontaminated the areas around Perama, Piraeus, necessitating further cleanup operation along the mainland. Of course, it was the unpumpable oil that remains on board. The responsibility for marine pollution response lies with the Marine Environmental Protection Division of the Ministry of Mercantile Marine, and both are managed by personnel of the Hellenic Coast Guard. The owner of the Agia Zoni appointed the Salvor to undertake salvage, oil removal, and pollution response activity. And the Salvor, for their own, appointed cleanup contractor and subcontractor to provide anti-pollution services. At the end, the contaminated shoreline were along 4 kilometers in the Salamina Island, a small island in the northwest of Piraeus, and around 25 kilometers on the coastline southeast of Athens. And a large quantity of boom, approximately 9 kilometers, and sorbent have been used. This is the picture of the shoreline and small harbor contaminated. About 400 people were used to clean the contaminated areas, and the cleanup operation continued on shore until December and January, so for 5 months. Those pictures speak themselves. Yeah. The Hellenic Center for Marine Research published a report which concluded that marine organisms were unaffected after December 2017, and regarding the seabed mapping, there were no evidence of bioaccumulation of residues detected in the 320-meter zone following the conclusion of the cleanup operation. The Hellenic Ornithology Society, at the end of October, said, "We don't yet know the exact number of birds that have been affected by the oil spill. Up now, we have found less than 10 birds coated in oil." Those are the pictures of the cleanup operation. Well, the last slide is dedicated to the conclusion of the IOPC and the ITOF found in their papers that are on their website concerning the analysis of the Agia Zoni case. The IOPC said that the technical advisor did advise the Greek authorities against a number of cleanup techniques which had been adopted by some of the municipalities, specifically the bulk removal of contaminated and uncontaminated sands and debris from the beaches, which create damage to the environment and large quantities of solid waste with the attendant cost of disposal rather than flushing the beach material in situ. The ITOF, the cleanup, was frustrated by political and commercial interests, as well as being complicated by poor coordination and the presence of a significant deposit of sunken oil. Several members of the team spent some 160 days on site working to instill good practices and attempting to reduce the volume of the waste generated. This is the beach of Salamina today. Thank you for attention.
Thanks very much to Rodolfo Giovannini for that, once again, incredibly detailed presentation, and which just gives us an idea of the complexity of what you're dealing with, which of course harks back to your situation, Eric, in phase 3, the environmental response. I guess to stick with what we've just heard for now, Rodolfo, I'll start off with this question and then get to some of the ones that have come in from our audience, because of course you've presented both the Costa Concordia and the Agia Zoni, two completely different situations, one with a huge waste problem and salvaging issue, and then the other one with this incredible marine pollution. The Costa Concordia really was very much a success story, but the Agia Zoni, we spoke about it and you showed these conclusions of these various bodies, could have been done much better. So to hark back to the question that we had in the first section, which was sort of did the Agia Zoni cause you to change your response plans? In what way could you learn from that to actually make changes for future emergency responses?
Yes, as I said.
And I'm going to give you the microphone, and Ruth, just to warn you, you've got one on that side as well. Thank you.
As I said in the presentation, we warned the owner to take care also to request the vessels. And it was the first time ever. And we are talking about 2012. We are now talking about 2017.
Yeah.
And it was the member state to request the vessel instead of a ship owner, of the responsible party. And it took this decision 3 days later, when they had the perfect windows of opportunity, famous window of opportunity, in the first 2 days, 3 days, and the vessel was half miles from the wreck. That's incredible, but it happens. And this was the first most important issue. The other ones, the coordination. It is right. What they said, the founds in their conclusion. I was once, I had the opportunity to speak with the coordinator, and he said that the same thing. I have to deal with all the municipalities with too many actors. I cannot afford to speak and to coordinate with so many actors that have voice in this moment. I would have more power. And so the coordination also is an important issue in this case. You should have the power to coordinate from yourself and not to interface every time with 3-4 different authorities.
Thanks very much. Let's get some responses from our two participants as to what you can take from what you've seen here in these real-life scenarios and what you were dealing with in the DBX. Ruth.
Okay, from my perspective and what was discussed in our groups, I mean, a number of participants made use of various scenarios to provide their input in the discussions. So I believe that these scenarios really gave input and sort of add-ons to what was being discussed.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an answer to that question, or Eric, can I proceed with one of the questions that comes in that I think that has to you. Keep the microphone, because you talked about knowing and accessing the different levels of support also on the European level. And there's a question here: what was the level of awareness in your group discussions? What was the level of awareness on the UCPM services? So the EMSA capacities, coordination, expertise, and logistics that are available for support. What somebody from outside is asking if you could go into that a little bit.
There was a certain level of awareness, but of course we are coming from different horizons, so the level of knowledge was different. And one of the positive effects of this exercise is that we have been able to develop a more common awareness and reach a kind of baseline. Now, not everybody of all actors will have to apply or use the same services, but it's very important that we know how the others are working, what are their concerns, so we can better understand what they are doing, and we can also better communicate from our side information that could be relevant for them. So sharing of information came as a very important issue that can support the good working and good collaboration of all the different actors involved.
So would you say that more events like this, discussion-based exercises that bring together so many different diverse actors from the different bodies would help to be able to know the different actors ahead of the responses?
I think it's one instrument. Mm-hmm. It should not be considered as the instrument. Mm-hmm. I think now we have raised awareness on a certain number of issues, and the next step, I think, would be to address those issues more separately before thinking about repeating the operation of such a DBX exercise at a later stage. But we have food for thought, and that's what we have now to concentrate on.
Ruth, I'd like to have your thoughts on that.
Yes, sure. So whilst the knowledge on these entities and the assistance that exists was diverse, some were a bit more aware than others, for sure the presence of these entities here with us, or representatives thereof, really helped us with the necessary information, with the necessary knowledge to sort of pass on to our colleagues at home eventually. So also the presence of the experts really helped us to be able to tap into the various resources, information that is now readily available.
And to what extent would it make sense to involve third countries, for instance, in future exercises? For example, different regions like North African or Eastern European countries?
Well, I mean, depending on the extent of an incident, the more help, the merrier, I guess. And this would also allow sharing of more knowledge, because we might not necessarily have the same resources, capabilities, information available in our region.
There's another question that's come here. Perhaps I can direct this to you, Eric, also because you were talking about this. Would it be useful to create certain European capacities? Oh, sorry, no, I've just lost the question that I was actually going to use. Just a moment here, not having good time with that. That question just disappeared on me. Can it be? This is the moderator who's not the technical whiz. Okay, so we'll go back. We'll go to this other question. Yeah, there it is. How can information sharing tools or warning systems actually be unified amongst the different informations? And is there a need for that unification?
But I think we have already reached a certain level of unification by using the tools that are made available by the Commission. So CESIS is the communication platform. SafeCNet is also one of the communication platform. Everybody is using it nowadays. And as long we are using it, we can adequately communicate with each other. So I think it is there already.
And how would you go about increasing the awareness of these various resources?
I think it's a continuous job to present those resources, and we have a meeting at EMSA. We have a meeting within the regional agreement where all the new development, the new services are systematically presented. And it's the duty of the member states to implement that in their procedure. And yeah, that's what we try to do all.
Any thoughts from you on that, Ruth? Or
Very similar to what my colleague said. So try to integrate as much knowledge and divulge as much information, provide and present these platforms during meetings so that you raise as much awareness as possible.
so I'm going to go back to this other question that I started at, but I think this is also directed, possibly you could answer this as well, Rodolfo. Would it be useful to create certain European capacities, for example, a module to cope with disaster waste management, such as a mobile thermal desorption plant for large oil spills, for instance? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we have already in place this module structure that to me is an excellent idea. And yes, there is room for improvement, of course, including the oil pollution modules, not only the oil pollution, the environmental remediation. It's an idea that I'm putting on the desk now. But with this experience, so we can open the light also to any other new module to put in the system. But we have in place this. Maybe it was not arise in this exercise because we were not talking too much for the civil protection side, more from the environmental and the cost problems. But it's, I think, 10 years or more or less that we started with this module way to affront the emergencies, and it is working well. It's a very excellent way to work.
And in terms of the Costa Concordia, to what extent have those lessons learned been used as a guideline for a waste recovery plan going forward in the future for other bodies to use?
The recovery, this to don't waste time to use the window of opportunity in case of oil spill is crucial. It's a decision that must be made immediately, as was a human life.
And there's also a question that's come in about with regard to specifically to the Costa Concordia. What seabed restoration measures were conducted, and how far has the restoration of the seabed progressed to date? You showed us those pictures; they didn't look.
Yes, it
very
was
good,
planned
but some time has passed.
Yes, as the last phase, of course, and in the last 5 years, we, on the basis of the point of view of the experts, it was not take less than 5 years, because it means to try to transplant some organisms that were in the origin in that place and that dead. So to transplant from another place, the nearby, and it's not easy. The successful rate normally is along 20–30%. They tested the transplantation before this period, and now is the ratio rises on the double. Now the actual ratio of success is 50–60%. That is an incredible result. It means that also the techniques has improved, and they studied very well the seabed. And this is very important because nowadays looks like 10 years ago. It's a beautiful picture of our island, and you don't see any difference from the top. So it's very, very good job that they've done, and that is not finished. So the Costa Concordia is not finished yet. We'll finish the plan. We'll terminate at the end of 2013.
Final question to our two participants, because of course this has been a really intensive exercise for both of you. What will be your takeaway, Ruth, to take back to your colleagues, and what are your thoughts for how to continue this kind of collaboration in the future?
Okay, so takeaways. For sure, taking the points raised, obviously, that were raised during the various phases of this exercise, taking them home and see how to make use of those points and improve. Taking into consideration the resources available and inform back home that these are there sort of for our use and when we need. Also the knowledge that the participants present are available to help us collaborate, share information, disseminate information, and assist with any difficulties that we might come across.
Thank you very much. Eric, you mentioned also this very important point that Rodolfo mentioned in our first session, which that environmental response is not static, obviously, because conditions with shipping and even fuels that are being used are changing all of the time. So new recovery plans, etc. What is that going to be sort of one of the main points of focus for what you take forward going from this interaction here on this DBX?
That's definitely one. We have to approach it in a flexible way, not to have plans that are too rigid, because every incident is different. So we need some guidelines, we need some principles, but the way we transform them in action must remain relatively flexible. And we need to evaluate the new risk, because the risk of 20 years ago are not comparable to the situation of today, and the situation of tomorrow will also be different. So we have to continue to continuously follow the evolution and adapt ourselves. That's one of the things. And the other thing that has also been mentioned by Rodolfo is to capitalize on the experience gained during incident. And for that, the aspect of post-incident analysis, debriefing, lessons learned, and dissemination of lessons learned, like the lessons learned with the Concordia, is very important. And that was one of the concerns expressed during the discussion, is how to keep that know-how, because those incidents are not taking place so often, luckily. But if I take my situation, I am about to retire, and one of my concern is how can I transfer my expertise to the people that will take over.
And would you say, simply because we had the point earlier and also yesterday in the discussions that the DBX format was really so new for so many, but very generic, and you made this point about actually keeping a flexibility, would you say that this format actually lends to, or is conducive to maintaining that kind of flexibility in the development of widely applicable plans?
I think so. It's dependent of the scenario, of course. Here we had a very good scenario that contained a lot of different situations we can face. Hopefully not all together, but okay, that was the purpose of the exercise. But it addressed things that in the reality can
Many
happen.
potential scenarios.
So the scenario will have to evolve also with the time. Maybe next time develop a scenario with an incident in wind farms, offshore wind farms, because that's posing new challenges for most of us.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you very much for bringing that point up. And thank you very much for a much more active question session. We had a lot more input this time around, so thanks to our audience, both virtual and physical here in the room. Thanks very much to Rodolfo Giovannini for, and of course also to David earlier this morning, and for detailing both of those cases, the Costa Concordia and the Agia Zoni. And thanks very much to Eric Donnay and to Ruf Ciarlo for presenting those two last phases. We will move into our lunch break, and I guess we are coming back. We will reconvene at 14 o'clock sharp to go into our afternoon session, where we'll look at a lot of the new technologies and developments. So thanks very much for your participation so far, and thanks to our panelists. And a bon appetit to everybody. You're going to need it, so get fortified.